Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy, and our topics for tonight are the Iran strike, the Israeli response, the Leahy Law, an October surprise, question mark, should have, and what's next. So that's what we'll be talking about for tonight. Hello, Dee. How are you tonight? I'm going to start with an article by Pepe Escobar, which appropriately is called They Lie, They Cheat, They Steal, They Bomb, and They Spin. Pepe wrote this on October 4th, or at least it was published on October 4th at the UNS Review. Maybe it was a little earlier this was probably originally published in Strategic Culture. Let me see what it says down here. Yeah, originally published at the Strategic Culture Foundation by Pepe. And he starts off, there are some what look like hypersonic missiles flying. And the caption reads, the Talmudic psychos, not only obsessed on breathing fire against the axis of resistance, but now also going after Russian national interests. I don't think that's a good idea, generally speaking, given the relative sizes of the two countries. A case could be made that Iran's ballistic retaliation night, the BRN, the ballistic retaliation night, a measured response to Israel's serial provocations, is less consequential when it comes to the efficacy of the axis of resistance than the decapitation of Hezbollah's leadership. Still, the message was enough to send the Talmudic psychopathologicals into a frenzy for all their hysterical denials and massive spin. Iron toilet paper and the arrow system were de facto rendered useless. The IRGC made it known that the volley of missiles was inaugurated by a single hypersonic Fateh 2 missile, which took out the Arrow 3 air defense system's radar, capable of intercepting missiles in the atmosphere. And well-informed Iranian military sources stated that hackers went on heavy cyber attack mode to disrupt the Iron Dome system just before the start of the operation. The IRGC finally confirmed that just about 90% of the intended targets were hit. The implication that each target was supposed to be visited by several missiles, with some getting intercepted. It's open to wide speculation how many F-35s and F-15s were ultimately destroyed or damaged on two of the air bases, one of which, specifically Nevatim in the Negev, becoming literally inoperable. The Iran-Russia military entente, part of their soon-to-be signed comprehensive strategic partnership, was in effect. The IRGC used the recently supplied Russian electromagnetic jammer to blind the Israeli NATO GPS systems, including those of U.S. aircraft. That explains the Iron Dome far off hitting the empty night skies. Framing Iran's retaliation as a casus belli, None of that substantially changed, the deterrence equation. Israel continues to bomb southern Beirut. The pattern remains the same. Whenever they're hit, the genocidals cry out in pain or whine like annoying babies, even as their killing machine keeps going with unarmed civilians as privileged targets. The bombing never stops, and it won't. From Palestine to Lebanon and Syria, across West Asia, and leading to the, quote, response, unquote, to Iran's ballistic nights. Iran is in an extremely tough geopolitical and military position, not to mention geoeconomics, still under a tsunami of sanctions. Obviously, the leadership in Tehran is fully aware of the trap being set by the Talmudic American Zionist combo, which want to lure Iran into a major war. Jake Sullivan, I should say, one of the stalwarts of the Biden combo, which is really dictating U.S. policy on behalf of their sponsors, considering the pathetic condition of the zombie in the White House, all but spelled it out. We have made clear that there will be consequences, severe consequences for this attack, and we will work with Israel to make sure that's the case, unquote. And I saw the headline of a video today suggesting or saying, that the United States and Israel had jointly worked out a plan of attack for the retaliation. No one knows, of course, what the plan is, but that squares with this quote from Jake Sullivan that we will work with Israel to make sure that's the case. Translation, says Pepe. Retaliation night is being spun as a casus belli. The U.S., Israel, or is it a final cause? It's the cause that is the excuse for war. U.S., Israel are already blaming Iran for the possibly incoming mega war in West Asia. The war is the holiest of the holy since at least the Cheney regime days, 2 decades ago, and yet Tehran, if it so decided, already has what it takes to raze Israel to the ground. It won't do it because the price to pay would be unbearable. Even if the Talmudic psychos and the Ziocons finally got their wish, a remote possibility, this war, after a devastating bombing campaign, could only be won with massive U.S. boots on the ground. Whatever the spin rolling on Ziocon-controlled think tank land / media swamp, that won't happen. And still, the march of folly proceeds uninterrupted. The Zionist project, the U.S.-Israel deadly embrace against Iran, but with a potent differential, the backup of Russia and further behind China. These three are the key BRICS triad. They are at the vanguard of trying to build a new, fair, and also a multinodal world. And not by accident, they happen to be the top 3 quote, existential, quote, threats, unquote, to the empire of chaos, lies, and plunder. And that, of course, is the United States empire. With Project Ukraine going down the drain of history, as well as burying for good the, quote, rules-based international order, unquote, in the black soil of Novorossiya, the real major front of the one war, the new incarnation of forever wars is Iran. In parallel, Moscow and Beijing fully realize that uh, uh, the more exceptionalist stand gets bogged down in West Asia. He has a bunch of great names for the United States. The more room of uh, uh, actual maneuver they have to accelerate the draining of the wobbly Leviathan. There's yet another new name, the wobbly Leviathan. Let me get back to the article. I hit another link and lost it for a moment. Gaza on the Litani. Hezbollah has a seriously tough spell ahead. Resources, especially supply of weapons and military equipment through Syria and by air from Iran to Lebanon, will become increasingly scarce. Compare it to Israel's unlimited supply chain from Exceptionalistan, not to mention the tons of money. The Israel intel is far from shabby as commandos went deep in secret into Hezbollah territory collecting info on the fortification network. When, in fact, if they reach populated areas in the southern part of Lebanon, then it will be bombing dementia plus heavy artillery against residential areas. The operation might well be called the uh, uh, Gaza on the Litani. It will happen only if Hezbollah's complex network in southern Lebanon is cracked. A major if, quote unquote. Jeffrey Sachs, for all his good intentions, went as far as he could to characterize Israelis as Judeo-supremacist extremist terrorists. Virtually the whole global majority is now aware of it. What comes next in Talmudic Ziocon planning may include a ghastly false flag, possibly after the U.S. presidential election, for instance, on a NATO vessel or on U.S. troops in the Persian Gulf, to lock up the new administration into the long-planned U.S. war on Iran. Dick Cheney will have an orgasm and then croak. The BRICS summit in Kazan under the Russian presidency is less than 3 weeks away. In sharp contrast to genocide and serial wars in West Asia, Putin and Xi will be standing by the open door on behalf of BRICS Plus, welcoming scores of nations that are fleeing the collective West like the plague. Russia is now fully behind Iran, and as much as in floundering Ukraine, that means Russia at war with the US/Israel. After all, the Pentagon is directly shooting down Iranian missiles, while Israel is the US's de facto preeminent state, fully fiscally supported by US taxpayers. Well, of course, we don't believe that US taxpayers support anything, but that's another story we'll get to some other day. It gets trickier by the minute. Immediately after a very important meeting between Alexander Lavrentiev, Putin's special envoy to Syria, and Ali Akbar Ahmadian, the secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council. Tel Aviv went full dementia. What else? And targeted warehouses of Russian forces in Syria. There was a joint Russia Syria air defense response. What that shows is the Talmudic psychos not only obsessed on breathing fire against the axis of resistance, but now also going after Russian national interests. This can get very ugly for them in a flash, and is yet one more illustration that the name of the new deadly game is US/Israel versus Russia/Iran. So that is Pepe's analysis of going on, okay, of what is going on in West Asia. Okay. And I think his wisdom also about what is really happening, the fundamentals, okay, of what is happening, and just for the sake of keeping the idea in our heads, I will say that again. The name of the new deadly game is US/Israel versus Russia/Iran. And maybe that is the new deadly game. What happens to Palestine in the wake of such a deadly game, okay, I do not know. Because I know Palestine will be engaged. I know Hezbollah is going to be engaged. I know the Houthis are going to be engaged. I know the Iraqi resistance is going to be engaged. I know the Syrian resistance is going to be engaged. I know Hamas is going to be engaged. As Netanyahu is fond of saying, we're fighting a seven-front war here. So that's something we have to keep in mind. I want, however, to elaborate on some of Pepe's thinking here. And fortunately, to help us with that, we have a video coming which I'll share in just a moment. Let me look at folks who are here. Okay, there is Evelina, Steve Wolfbrandt. Hi, Steve. And Dee says, I'm okay sharing. And she says, hello, Steve. Dawn Foster is here. Steve Wolfbrandt is waving. Also, Lana Dell is here. Steve says, hi, Lana. And Steve shared on Facebook. Dee said, hi, Lana. And Dee shared on Facebook and Twitter. I think the sharing has been very helpful. We now are at 152 attendees according to the StreamYard indicator, judging from last night or Thursday night. It could be a lot more than that. My indicator on Thursday night was showing about 75 people, and it turned out that I had 340 on Facebook, about rather than the 75. I had about 70 or 75 on YouTube. I forget what it was. And I had another 80 on X. I got to get used to calling it X. I still call it Twitter. Sometimes I say Zitter. Anyway, let's get to the next piece, which is a video. The video is a stream by Larry Johnson. His channel is known as Counter Currents. It's up there. He is a former CIA agent. For those who did not know, I believe he was on he might have been on both sides. At one point on the intelligence side and at another point on the spying side. But now he is among the segment of former CIA agents, okay, who are basically peaceniks. And, he joins a number of such, okay, intelligence people in that. But here he is talking to Pepe Escobar, and he had a much longer talk with Pepe than Judge Knapp had last week, and they went into some other subjects. I'm going to play and comment on uh, roughly 24 minutes, okay, of this. Okay, so here we go.
Welcome back to Countercurrents, following up on the smashing success with Alistair Crook. Who better to come in after Alistair Crook than Pepe Escobar? Mi amigo, mi compañero. Yes, Pepe, how you doing, brother?
Or we can go hardcore. Hola, cabrón. ¿Qué tal?
¿Qué tal? or Ogia tá lindo, with your Brazilian roots.
Yeah, exactly. But
So,
you are.
Oh
there's sunshine. I'm sure where you. There's sunshine. Here is 11 p.m.
Yeah, well, this here I'm in Florida. They do call it the Sunshine State. We've had our fair share, though. We got got hammered a week ago with a hurricane.
With the hurricane, yes.
Yeah.
Wow, that was pretty hardcore. Wow.
Yeah, it stayed offshore, but the folks out on the barrier islands, they got crushed.
Exactly.
Now, if there's a good news silver lining to it, most of the ones out there on the barrier islands are pretty wealthy, and so they're able to afford the loss. But there were some that couldn't, and it was really it wasn't a big rain event, but it was the force of the wind and the water out.
The force of the wind, right? Yeah.
I'm far enough inland. We just got occasional wind gusts, occasional torrential downpours, and no damage.
Of course, it went very badly for parts of North Carolina and South Carolina, in particular the Asheville area. Parts of Tennessee, I guess, were very, very hard hit.
We fared better than the folks are in, say, Gaza, Lebanon.
Well, there's no comparison, Larry. Wow.
Yeah.
Or in Lebanon, or people who live in southern Beirut, which is a very dense, urbanized area, and you have civilian buildings being bombed nonstop.
Well, it appears there's now a growing recognition that Israel is a terrorist state out of control.
Absolutely.
That
I think they're absolutely right about that. And of course, I have to agree and have felt that for a long time. Way, way out of control, and terrorist in the pure sense of the word, of a group that tries to go after civilians and to make them very, very afraid with their extreme violence.
And so let me qualify what I mean. The metric I use, that the number of civilians that are killed or wounded as a result of attacks by a group or state. That's what qualifies, makes you a terrorist. Absolutely. It's one thing if you're killing people wearing a uniform. For example, the United States has always classified the attack on the Marine barracks in Beirut in 1983 as a, quote, terrorist attack.
Terrorist attack, yeah.
Well, it wasn't. It was a military attack. It was an attack on a military target. They have weapons. They can shoot back. And it was, I'm not saying that I was happy about it, but at least one of sort of the hallmarks that we've had of Hezbollah is they tend to attack military targets, or what would they would consider a legitimate target of war. Whereas what we've seen out of Israel has just been off the charts, killing civilians right and left without any regard to it.
Hezbollah never attacked civilians because Hezbollah, of course, it's simplifying a lot. Two heads, civilian and military. The military wing and the civilian wing of Hezbollah is a socially minded and communitarian-minded party. They help people. They understand. They understand that perfectly. So it will never hit civilians, even enemy civilians. Never.
Here, I have to remark that what the United States was saying in its official statements about it, what the State Department was saying, and what Biden said at one point, was that the Iranian attack was a terrorist attack, okay, on civilians, innocent civilians. Okay, they were called. And of course, the missile attack was strictly restricted to military targets and to Mossad. It was notable, okay, for that. And of course, it's also true that only one civilian was killed, and that civilian was a Palestinian who was killed from falling debris. That was the only fatality we know about. So, calling out the Iranian attack as a cowardly or terroristic attack on civilians was a barefaced lie by the United States.
Well, in fact, that was the point that Alistair made about with the pager attack, that those pagers were largely in the hands of people that were involved with social services, education, healthcare. They weren't military personnel.
And the Israelis know that, because Hezbollah, they only communicate via their own fiber optic system. The Israelis, of course, because they have human intelligence in Beirut and in a few points in southern Lebanon, they know that. So they did it on purpose.
Yeah.
Which means they committed a war crime because they attacked civilians. Their targets were civilians. They knew the pagers were going to be used by civilians. And they thought that since the civilians were members of Hezbollah, that such an attack on them was justified. But not according to international law. That's a war crime.
They knew that 90-something% of the victims would be civilians.
So let's talk about this. The Iranians finally retaliating for the murder of Ismail Haniyeh.
Ballistic retaliation night, we called it yesterday. It was being celebrated in Indonesia, in Malaysia. It's amazing.
Yeah,
in Sarajevo, Baghdad, everywhere.
I need to send you some emails so you can read them. It's from there's a group of people. I'm on an email chain, and there are several, I call 5 or 6 hardcore Zionists in there. It's the most delusional nonsense you've ever read. So now they've convinced themselves that Iran has now completely isolated itself, and that the Arab nations are going to join together with Israel to go crush Iran. I mean, this is what they're really.
This is what they actually believe. Right?
These are some of these people are in touch with Gallant and with senior members of the current Israeli government. So we're not talking about just fringe people. We're talking about folks that are wealthy, well connected in the United States, and very well connected in Israel. So correct the record on how Iran right now is being perceived, not just in the Shia world, but in the Sunni world.
All over the lands of Islam, with minimal exceptions, I would say, perhaps the wealthy in Saudi Arabia, Emirates, Kuwait, and Bahrain, Sunnis in Bahrain, although Shiites are the majority in Bahrain. Everywhere else in the lands of Islam, the overwhelming majority of the 57 members of the Organization of the Islamic Conference, they were expecting Iran to do what they did yesterday. And they were complaining before that, why are they not acting? Well, it's very cool. I tried talking to Judge Knapp, Larry, but with you, we can even have more time to talk.
Yeah, let's explore that, because I think that's really some great insights about Pezeshkian getting played.
No, he didn't.
Okay. So they're referring to the president of Iran. Okay, the new president.
Not get played. He was overruled. Well, first of all, because the Iranian system is Khamenei that coordinates foreign policy.
Okay, so he is the supreme leader. of Iran, okay, the Ayatollah. Very, very impressive, very, very clever person, and the highest power, okay, in Iran.
Some stuff is delegated to the presidency, but the absolutely crucial matters, for instance, an operation like this one, it's Khamenei that decides. The problem is it's not a frontal clash, but there's some serious tension between the IRGC, especially the hardcore generals, and Pezeshkian and the people around Pezeshkian, and basically Zarif, his vice president, who is basically, he wants an accommodation with the West since the time he used to hang out with John Kerry. This has not changed. And a lot of people in Iran are also getting very, very, I was told that the Iranian social media this past few days, people are pissed. They were blaming Pezeshkian personally for the murder of Nasrallah.
Yeah, the logic there is that since the first attack by the Iranians, okay, in April was so measured, so light, it was trying to demonstrate to Israel that Iran had the capability to evade the various air defense systems around Israel and to hit also their targets. And in that attack, which was a complex attack, layered attack of 350 flying objects, there were 9 ballistic missiles that hit their targets. The Iranians thought demonstrating the openness of Israel to these missiles would be enough to restore deterrence and show the Israelis that they could be hurt by Iran, strongly hurt by Iran. And at first, it was thought, that attack was successful. It looked as though Israel backed off its attacks for some period of time, but then, of course, over the summer, they renewed them again, okay, and they intensified them. So with this attack on October 1st, what the Iranians were trying to do was to make it more emphatic and harder to ignore that they could get through the Israeli defenses. And so this attack featured 180 ballistic missiles. And according to the Iranians, 90% of them got through. According to the Israelis, there may have been 2 of them that had gotten through. But if you look at the video evidence, there's lots and lots of video evidence of these missiles getting through and hitting the ground, hitting their targets, being missed by the anti-missile defenses, by David Sling, by the Arrow defense, by the Iron Dome, all missed. And it looks like the Iranian claim that 90% of the missiles got through was much closer to the truth, than the Israeli claim that almost nothing got through. Now, by the way, it's fairly well known now that there's a huge crater in front of the Mossad building in Tel Aviv. So that's very interesting also. But, so going on here.
This is extremely serious. So obviously, Khamenei is on social networks. He has a website. He's very active on social networks. And the people around him, he has a very, and it's young people. I visited his website in Tehran years ago, like 10 years ago or so. Now it's probably even more sophisticated. It's a bunch of young people. And they follow all the social networks in the world, and then they translate into Farsi if it's necessary. So Khamenei is aware of what's being talked about, not only in X, but also obviously in the Iranian social networks. So there was a popular pressure, number one, for a response for Haniyeh and now Nasrallah. And there was a groundswell of rage against Pezeshkian personally, in fact. He's weak, he's wimpish, and then he goes out in public and admits, we believed what the Americans told us.
Yeah, that's what I found that astonishing.
Crazy, exactly.
Yeah.
Can you imagine a president of Iran? Can you imagine Raisi ever doing something like this?
Here he's referring to the former president, okay, of Iran, who died in a helicopter crash. And there, of course, was considerable suspicion that the helicopter crash was managed actually by Mossad. So there's considerable suspicion that that too was an assassination going on.
Well, that's what I meant when I said he got played. He comes out and goes,
when you said you got played, you mean he got played by the Americans?
Yes,
absolutely correct.
He's like, my God, they lied to me.
They lied to me. Obviously, they lied to you. They were, they never had any intention of, especially in terms of Gaza, which the Americans do not dictate Gaza policy. Netanyahu and his cabinet of lunatics do.
Yeah.
And obviously the Iranians know that as well. So obviously Khamenei, this time he acted very swiftly. Only 4 days after the assassination of Nasrallah. I'm sure you and our audience remember how people all over the world were extremely dejected this past weekend.
Yes.
At Saturday and Sunday. People were, now it's over. The face of the resistance is gone. Hezbollah has crumbled. The whole command structure has been annihilated. That's it. That's the end. No, it's different. First of all, because Hezbollah is not like that. Hezbollah is like the Viet Cong.
Yeah.
you understand exactly what he means, right, Larry? Hezbollah is like the Viet, and they learn lessons from the Viet Cong. And they have sub-commanders who are as well prepared as the commanders, and Nasrallah invested on that for years, in fact.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating because today something surfaced that it's almost like he knew that he was going to get killed. And Khamenei told him, look, we have very good intel, they're coming after you. And still he did not leave. And Khamenei offered him, okay, come to Iran. And he stayed in Beirut. And he died like a real man. Mm-hmm. And in terms of Shiite cosmology, he died properly as a martyr in the middle of a war, assassinated by the enemy. This is the highest possible honor in the Shiite universe, But he knew it. But, and he also was preparing the people who were going to follow me and the commanders at a very high level. So it was an enormous blow. There's no question about that. But it will take them some time to reorganize, and they will be back, stronger than before, in fact.
Okay, so some time sounds like it might be considerable time. But Hezbollah made serious attacks on Israel right after the Iranian attacks on October 1st. And they have continued with rocket and missile attacks continuously since that time, from October 1st up until now. And of course, the Israelis are now carrying on a ground invasion, of Lebanon. They've been doing this for a couple of days. And there are videos claiming that the Israeli troops have been trapped and that Hezbollah, is cutting them to ribbons, and that there are already hundreds of casualties, hundreds of fatalities when it comes to the Israeli soldiers who have been crossing the border, okay, and penetrating Lebanon. Okay, the terrain where they're going there is very, very favorable to but defensive forces who can easily set up ambushes, and that is what but they're doing. And they're supposedly cutting the Israelis up already. 4 tanks have been lost. Okay, the results are very good for Hezbollah, and meanwhile, they continue their missile and rocket attacks. There have been also further attacks from the Iraqi resistance, very serious attacks on the Golan Heights. Okay, and there have been also serious attacks by the Houthis as well. So Israel is still getting attacked by the axis of resistance. Since October 1st, more and more of the axis of resistance seems to be joining in sending missiles towards Israel. And this is going on while Israel is planning retaliation. And as I said before, they supposedly have hit on a plan for retaliation earlier today sometime. I'm expecting there might be a retaliatory attack even as we're on here streaming. But I don't know, of course. But I wouldn't be surprised if we found there was an attack by the Israelis at that time. A very dangerous game is going on. I'll continue.
And the fact that this happened for just to finish, Larry. Sorry, the Iranian reaction happened only 4 days after Nasrallah's assassination, which is a kind of tribute to the power of Nasrallah.
Right.
And even if it was moderate, it was a moderate response, very calibrated. And some of the generals are saying, look, we could have destroyed the Mossad headquarters. We didn't. We prefer not to. We can, but not now. This is a warning.
Yeah.
But they also know that the warnings, that crazy cabinet and Netanyahu, they live in a parallel universe.
Well, let's flesh this out, because
yes,
I think what's happened in the last 24 hours, despite, the previous week was, the Israelis dancing, singing, celebrating, we blew up the pagers and we killed Nasrallah and we killed this IRGC general. Okay. The last 24 hours, Iran launches this ballistic missile attack that the Israelis could not stop, even though they knew it was coming.
Exactly.
And then an entire platoon, basically, of Israeli special operations forces gets wiped out in southern Lebanon.
56 or 57, is that it?
I thought it was over 40. The number I saw was over 40, 42, 40. So
the latest number I got here is like 50-something.
50-something? It could be.
Yeah.
Okay, dead or wounded. And
is that,
so all of a sudden, the Israeli belief that they had decimated Hezbollah, you got a wake-up call. Hezbollah is, I compared it that Hamas is sort of like a bothersome mosquito, or maybe a room full of bothersome mosquitoes. Hezbollah is killer bees.
I thought that was a great analogy by Larry. Hezbollah is killer bees.
Definitely.
They'll light you up. So, with respect, talk about the difference, the message that that Iran sent with its April attack, vice the one that they sent yesterday, and then what is left for them to send in the future.
Well, in the future, they're going to launch 500 missiles. Apparently, the final figure coming from the IRGC in the past few hours is roughly 200 missiles. Okay. Remember that this back and forth, 80 to 400. So now they clarify it's around 200 missiles. Most of them ballistics, and a few hypersonics, which are not the hypersonics that the Russians have. It's not a King Zal.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hypersonic for part of the trajectory, not the whole trajectory.
Right.
Still, they're in 15 minutes,
Yeah.
which quite
So Pepe is telling us there that the Iranian missile, the Fatah 2, which was very successful in penetrating the Israeli defenses, was only partially hypersonic, meaning that it wasn't hypersonic for all of its trip from Iran, okay, to Israel. Okay, and this is in contrast to a hypersonic missile the Russians called the Kinjal missile. Okay, so the Kinjal missile would have gotten there faster. Okay, but the Fatah 2 took roughly 15 minutes. Not much warning time, but there was prior warning because Iran talked to the United States, so Israel knew there was an attack that was coming. I don't think they knew the number of missiles in the attack, but they had some warning. The next attack, they're not going to have some warning. Also, I think that Pepe is underestimating the likely quantity of missiles, okay, in the next attack. I personally think it's going to be more than 2,000 missiles, okay, in the next attack. It's going to be absolutely devastating.
something. They probably launched what, 20 or so, 25 or so, and those reach the targets.
Yeah, again, he's talking about the hypersonic missiles, 20 hypersonic missiles, 20 Fatah 2s.
Especially the three air bases, right? So compared to April, this was, they were up a notch. Not.
Okay, by the way, I saw, a video where people were counting the missiles that had gotten through to the Nevatim Air Force Base. In other words, they were counting the explosions as they came out of the air and hit the ground. And they counted exactly 17 explosions that hit, the air base.
Too much. And when you listen to the IRGC generals, which these guys never say anything in public, and suddenly they are so talkative, and even with a slight sense of humor, like, we could have destroyed this program, but we didn't. It's just a warning.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they have to be serious because they know that the warning will not be understood once again. And this, Larry, now I want to ask you something, because I think this is extremely serious and can be interpreted as an American declaration of war against Iran. Mm-hmm. Jake Sullivan, this is what he said. I'm quoting him. "We have made clear that there will be consequences, severe consequences for this attack, and we will work with Israel to make sure that's the case." How do you interpret this, Larry?
Yeah, no, it's a threat. Well, I think it's driven more by the politics of the moment, because the Biden administration's caught. The last thing they want is a war prior to the election, because that feeds into Trump's narrative that these guys are a bunch of crazy warmongers. Trump kept us at peace for 4 years. These guys are putting Americans at risk. On the other hand, there is a lot of sentiment support thinking, oh, here's poor Israel. They got missiled without cause. Now, and here's where Israel's sort of playing it wrong, because they're doing the Ukrainian thing. We shot down every missile. We shot down every one. It didn't cause any damage. Well, if it didn't cause any damage, what's the big deal?
Exactly.
Why should we care if it didn't cause any damage? But so Israel's got to figure out which storyline it wants to run with, as opposed to the lie. And they had their Baghdad Bob moment yesterday, saying we shot everyone down, and everybody could see the damn videos of those. Boom, 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 boom. You remember that old video game you used to play where you try to shoot down incoming missiles? That's exactly what it looked like.
Absolutely. Yes.
That's from 30, 40 years ago. But so I see this progression that in April, Iran was simply doing a demonstration. They were they were letting Israel and the West know, look, we can hit you, but we're telling you in advance what we're going to do. We're telling you how we're going to do it. So you're welcome to shoot down what we're going to send you, but we're just showing you that we can do it. And instead of the West drawing a lesson saying, hey, the Iranians actually have a serious capability now, came to the opposite conclusion. Oh, Iran sucks. It was a complete failure. Okay, so yesterday, what's the message? Iran lets Washington and Moscow know, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to only hit military targets. But they didn't give them so much advanced warning that but they had enough advanced warning, which is why, the White House and everybody's announcing the Iranians are going to hit, the Iranians are going to launch, because they knew Iran had told them. And again, once again, when it's over, they didn't lay a hand on us. We shot them all down. They were complete. They fell into empty fields. And, this little Jewish group of guys I was telling you about, they're saying, I told them, I said, no, you can see that, here's the video. Oh, that's just Iranian propaganda. It's video footage from people living in Israel who, the last I checked, are not Iranians.
Exactly.
They don't welcome the Persians there. So they're in complete denial. And now Israel's poised, saying, okay, you hit us, we're going to hit you back. And we're going to go after oil targets. And Iran said, you come back after us, we're going to be more destructive. So talk about what more destructive means and what Russia's role within this could be.
Well, Russia's role is absolutely crucial. I have to tell you again what I told the judge. The famous Putin rush to the Kremlin slightly before midnight on Monday night for an impromptu, unscheduled, very important meeting.
Okay, this was Tuesday, of course, was the launch. So this was just before the launch. Most probably Moscow was getting news that there was going to be a launch on the next day. That's why Putin was called very late at night to come to a meeting.
Security meeting. It was always about Iran because they are in close touch, especially now that they are about to clinch the comprehensive strategic partnership, Chinese style, which also includes military. And military, definitely, because this is something that I heard here, Larry, last year. There was an Iranian delegation last year, in March last year. And one of them told us, look, it was great. The meeting was excellent. And the Iranians said, anything you need from us, just ask. And the Russians reciprocally saying, so this has been going on for a year and a half now.
I think that point is a very, very important point. The Iranians and Russians have been getting closer and closer now for a year and a half. Also, the Iranians in the Ukraine war, very, very useful to the Russians. They were shipping drones to the Russians, which were very effective and very deadly on the battlefield.
High-level military exchanges, everything, drones, missiles, etc. Missile technology, of course. Although the Fatah 1 and Fatah 2, they were developed by Iranians themselves, apparently, with no Russian help, let's put it this way. And they are not totally hypersonic. They are semi-hypersonic. So, and apparently this... according to good intel sources here, yes, Netanyahu was trying to call Putin. And the Russians said, no, he has no time for this phone call. That tells you everything. And what Nebenzia said at the UN, the permanent Russian representative at the UN, he smashed Israel at the UN. He condemned everything. not only the assassination of Nasrallah, the current, okay, it's a little bit too much, but the preamble of genocide 2.0 against civilians in Lebanon.
Yeah.
So, the split between Israel and Russia was never so. I would say in this past 2-3 years, it's reaching the climax at the moment. Of course, immensely complicated for Putin to navigate. 1 million Russian passport holders living in Israel.
I did not know there were 1 million Russian passport holders living in Israel. They obviously are Jews. They're part of the oligarchy in Russia.
Right.
It's tough. That's very, very tough. Jewish oligarchs, extremely powerful here. They own banks. They know large companies. Putin has to at least, not antagonize them frontally. And of course, the Zionist lobby in Moscow is very, very powerful, still very powerful. So this is extremely complicated, but the level of exasperation from the Kremlin to the Security Council, to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, reaching even Taoist Lavrov personally,
Yeah.
tells you that they are already fed up with the whole thing.
Well,
and on top of it, BRICS, which is one of our, we're going to get there soon, right? How can Russia, the Russian presidency of BRICS, start to organize the philosophical stone, the lineaments of the new multipolar world when we have what's happening in Ukraine, and when you have a genocide plus a second war and maybe a third war in West Asia.
Yeah.
And including one of the BRICS members, and touching other BRICS members like Egypt, the Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. So to navigate all this, the complexity is absolutely mind-boggling. I think this explains why especially since last week, there's nothing, there are no news about intra-BRICS discussions. It's like, they are working on the moon, literally,
Mm-hmm.
I'll try to get something next week, but for this week, they said, look, there's nothing. There are no leaks. They're not saying what they're discussing. So, it's totally opaque. I assume because of the sensitivity of the geopolitical and military situation at the moment on the West Asian front. No?
I wonder if Russia is sending any back channel messages to Netanyahu, to the Israelis,
Excellent question.
saying, for example, number one, we have equipped Iran with S-400 air defense systems, and our personnel are there. Any attack on them will be viewed as an attack on us. Number one.
Of course.
Number two,
exactly.
we've had long-standing military relationship in terms of joint exercises with Iran going back at least 5 years, if not longer. So to put Israel on notice that any attack on Iran would actually be potentially perceived as an attack on Russia.
Absolutely.
I wonder if that kind of warning
would be behind as well.
Yeah. So
because
if that kind
of strategic partnership Iran-China. Yes.
Yeah. So you think that kind of warning might help convince the Israelis to cool their jets?
It depends. Convince who, Larry? Maybe Netanyahu, who's a wily politician, will get the message, but not the cabinet, and certainly not those ultra fanatics.
Yeah, the Smotrich and Ben Gvir
and these people. Forget it. It's absolutely impossible to even try to talk to these people. But Netanyahu will see the writing on the wall. No question, especially because they have a direct connection with Putin. They can pick up the phone and talk anytime.
Yeah.
Putin doesn't want to talk at the moment. That's different because he is furious with the whole thing, obviously.
So I'm going to stop it here. But you see how complex this is. and how the role of Russia becomes more and more important in what's going on. It figures into calculations by the Israelis and calculations, by the Iranians. It's going to have an impact on probably the severity of the back and forth between them. We don't know what the impact is going to be yet, but of course, the presence of Russia in this now has to be a primary consideration both for Iran and for Israel. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. Okay, a great video, of course, full of information, okay, for the rest of us. I'm going to go back to your comments. By the way, there are 248 people here on my indicator. That is a very welcome development. Lana says, please all hit that like button. Steve Wolfbrand says, smash the like button. Steve Wolfbrand says, Israel lies. You bet. Lana says, I just cringe when I think of Netanyahu destroying Israel. For what? Is anyone in his cabinet warning against his actions? It seems absolutely nuts. The people in his cabinet, Lana, they're the right-wing people, okay, in his cabinet. They are absolutely messianic. I mean, they are fanatics. They think God is on their side. They are going after Greater Israel. And by Greater Israel, they don't just mean the whole of Palestine. What they mean is an area that extends from the Nile River to the Euphrates. It encompasses parts of Lebanon, parts of Syria, parts of Egypt, okay, parts of Iraq. And it seems like this group is beginning to go for it. It's beginning to go for this kind, okay, of victory, which they think could be achievable if they drag the United States into the war. Of course, I think they're making a mistake because they're grossly overestimating the power of the United States in this particular situation. We don't have the capability they think we have. So I'm going to go on now. To the Leahy Law. What does the Leahy Law say? It's a piece from Common Dreams. I will go through that. House Democrats say, quote, impunity for Israel violates U.S. Human rights law. Quote, numerous credible reports of gross violations of human rights by Israeli security forces have rightly placed U.S. enforcement of the Leahy Law in sharp focus, unquote. As the death tolls, this is by Brett Wilkins, October 4th, 2024. As the death tolls from the U.S.-backed Israeli assaults on Gaza and Lebanon neared 42,000 and 2,000, respectively. Most of those 2,000, okay, in Lebanon are civilians, of course. The death toll in Gaza, 42,000, of course, is severely underestimated. It's an official death toll. The death toll, which is estimated in the manner of the Lancet, is now approaching roughly 200,000 there. So we have to say that. A group of House Democrats this week urged the Biden administration to hold Israel accountable to human rights standards established under existing domestic law. In other words, what they're about to say is the United States is not enforcing domestic law. going on. In a letter to Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, dated September 30th, but first published Friday by HuffPost, the Democratic lawmakers representatives Jim McGovern, Massachusetts, Barbara Lee of California, Betty McCollum of Minnesota, Mark Pocan of Wisconsin, and Joaquin Castro of Texas expressed their, quote, a deep alarm regarding the lack of U.S. enforcement of the Leahy Law as it pertains to U.S. assistance to Israel, unquote. Named after its author, former Senator Patrick Leahy, Democrat of Vermont. The Leahy laws were approved in 2 rounds in the late 1990s. The legislation built on the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961, which prohibits U.S. military aid to foreign security forces that commit gross human rights violations. Quote, we strongly urge you to apply the law as written and act swiftly to bar any Israeli military unit that faces credible accusations of committing a gross violation of human rights from receiving the U.S. assistance or training, unquote, the lawmakers wrote in their letter. It's a tweet from Joaquin Castro. The United States must consistently enforce human rights laws with all allies and partners. And the names mentioned again are the same 4 we mentioned earlier. McGovern and McCollum and Barbara Lee and Mark Pocan. I wrote to the State Department and DOD to press for full Leahy Law compliance with U.S. aid to Israel. And that was a quote tweet of a tweet by Akbar Shahed Ahmed, Scoop, citing Israel's attacks in Lebanon. 5 top Democrats are pushing Biden to subject it to the Leahy Law and end the, quote, culture of impunity, unquote, fueling human rights abuses. They say his approach endangers by U.S. citizens, pressure in Congress ahead of November votes. That was a quote from HuffPost. Quote again, as longtime friends and allies of Israel, we have supported and continue to support security assistance to Israel for the purposes of legitimate self-defense, unquote, the letter states. Quote, Israel continues to face serious threats from Hamas, Hezbollah, and other terrorist groups. As it defends against these threats, Israel must ensure it is using U.S. security assistance and funding in compliance with U.S. law, whether in the West Bank, Gaza, Lebanon, or elsewhere, unquote. According to the letter, numerous credible reports of gross violations of human rights by Israeli security forces have rightly placed U.S. enforcement of the Leahy Law in sharp focus. Israeli and international human rights organizations have released credible reports of Israeli security units subjecting Palestinians in Israeli detention centers to torture, ill treatment, prolonged detention without charges or trial, and rape under color of law. Extensive investigations by reputable media outlets have also documented multiple instances of civilians carrying white flags being shot and killed by the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, in Gaza. The letter comes ahead of the anniversary of the Hamas-led October 7th attack on Israel and that country's retaliation, which has left more than 148,000 Palestinians in Gaza dead, maimed, or missing, and millions forcibly displaced, starved, and sickened. Israel is currently on trial for genocide at the International Court of Justice an international criminal court, prosecutor Karim Khan, is seeking arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, as well as for leaders of Hamas. In recent weeks, Israel has also ramped up airstrikes and launched a ground invasion in Lebanon, from which Hezbollah has been launching aerial attacks on Israel since shortly after October 7th. Thousands of Lebanese have been killed or wounded. All of this is enabled by tens of billions of dollars worth of nearly unconditional U.S. military aid and diplomatic cover, including multiple vetoes of United Nations Security Council ceasefire resolutions. While the Biden administration delayed shipment of a limited number of heavy bombs of a type that Israel was used to massacre civilians in densely populated areas, those shipments soon resumed, even as the Gaza death toll soared ever higher. It was also some of those bombs, of course, that was used in the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah. And Mark Pocan tweeted, "The Leahy Law is not a radical idea. It's common sense. The U.S. must enforce existing law and halt assistance to any Israeli military unit that faces credible accusations of human rights abuses." And there is a photo from HuffPost amid the bloodshed in Lebanon. Key House Democrats say U.S. must end Israeli culpability, I guess that's going to say. In a letter obtained by HuffPost, lawmakers urged the State Department and Pentagon to apply human rights law to U.S. military support for Israel. So there, of course, is what looks like one Palestinian or Lebanon citizen helping another who was damaged by the airstrikes. The failure, quote, "the failure of the United States to consistently apply our own laws has contributed to a culture of impunity in the IDF that actively endangers the lives of U.S. Citizens," unquote. The lawmakers asserted before highlighting, quote, again, "gross violations of human rights," unquote, perpetrated by Israeli forces against several Americans. Here again, we have in certain areas not a two-party system, but a uniparty. And when one member of the uniparty refuses to enforce our laws because the other member of the uniparty feels essentially the same way, the check and balance of impeachment is not there. If Joe Biden fails to execute our laws, in this case the human rights laws, he should be subject to impeachment on those grounds. And if our two parties were doing their job and opposing each other, he probably would have been impeached by the Republicans, already. But of course, the Republicans agree on the violations of human rights, so they ignore our laws. So these include one of the Americans who was victimized, is Omar Assad, an elderly former Milwaukee grocer who in January 2023 was dragged from his vehicle, was blindfolded, gagged, and handcuffed before falling silent while being detained, in Gilgillia. Renowned Al Jazeera correspondent Shireen Abu Akleh, who multiple probes found was deliberately shot dead while covering an IDF raid in the West Bank in May 2022. And most recently, 26-year-old International Solidarity Movement ISM activist Aysenur Ezgi Agi, who was shot in the head during a September 6th demonstration against Israel's illegal West Bank settler colonies. Israeli impunity for killing Americans far predates the examples that were listed in the letter. For example, in 2003, the ISM activist Rachel Corrie was crushed to death by a U.S. supplied Israeli military bulldozer while trying to stop the demolition of Palestinian homes in the West Bank. In 1967, Israeli warplanes and warships repeatedly attacked the spy ship, the USS Liberty, in the Mediterranean Sea, killing 34 sailors and others and wounding 171 more, and what numerous senior U.S. officials, including the then Secretary of State and CIA director, said was a deliberate act. At least one American has also been killed by Israeli bombing in Lebanon this week. Haj Kamal Ahmad Jawad, 56 of Dearborn, Michigan, was killed in an airstrike Tuesday while in Nabateh in southern Lebanon, caring for his sick mother and volunteering to help elderly, disabled, and injured patients at a local hospital. When it functions properly, the Leahy Law serves two crucial purposes. It prevents U.S. complicity in gross violations of human rights, and it deters violations by incentivizing foreign governments to hold the perpetrators accountable, unquote, the Democratic lawmakers wrote in their letter. However, the Leahy Law can only serve these purposes when it is enforced. So they're asking the violator of the Leahy Law, specifically Joe Biden, to enforce the Leahy Law on himself. Fat chance that's going to happen. Indeed, successive U.S. administrations have supported some of the world's worst human rights violators, including the perpetrators of genocidal mass murder in Indonesia, Paraguay, Cambodia, Guatemala, Bangladesh, East Timor, Kurdistan, and Gaza, since the passage of the Foreign Assistance Act and Leahy Laws. Quote, we strongly urge you to uphold the rule of law, bar assistance to any unit that is credibly implicated in a gross violation of human rights, and ensure perpetrators of crimes against American citizens face accountability and justice, unquote, the letter's signers concluded. So what are we going to do about that? The Leahy laws are certainly being violated. It's an open and shut case. We ought to be in the streets to stop this particular violation. I don't know if it would help to be in the streets, but I have to believe that if we could get 2 million people to care about this, to care that the present administration is violating U.S. law, refusing to enforce U.S. law, maybe that would make some difference. I have to say I doubt that because of the donors. Everybody dances to the tune, of the donors. But we have to do something. We have to do something. When they're violating a law, it is just too much. So, going back to comments, John B. has joined and says Chas Freeman gave a great talk yesterday. CYT Ambassador Chas Freeman is a Zionist state now doing itself in. A great summary of the Middle East spoiled by his insistence on U.S. taxpayer dollars. I know everybody uses the term U.S. taxpayer dollars. It drives me wild also, John B. Absolutely wild. Please like, share, and subscribe. On my indicator, I've got only one like on Facebook, but I know there have to be a lot more likes because there are at least 252 people that hear, so I know that also. Anyway, let us get to the final piece of the evening, which is another from the UN's review, and it is called, Will Israel Pull Off an October Surprise? And this piece is by Philip Giraldi, who's another former member of the CIA, turned peacenik. He is also, to be more formal about it, he is Philip M. Giraldi, PhD, Executive Director of the Council for the National Interest, a 501c3 tax-deductible educational foundation, federal ID number 52-1739023, that seeks a more interest-based U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. The website is councilforthenationalinterest.org, and he's located in Purcellville, Virginia, which is not awfully far from where I am sitting now. Its email is inform@cnionline.org. Okay, so this piece is by Phil Giraldi, who also frequently appears on Judge Napolitano's program. Here's a photo of Anthony Blinken meeting with the psychopath himself, Mr. Netanyahu. There's some speculation in Washington about a so-called October surprise being engineered by either party or their supporters to change the outcome of the upcoming election. And it goes through the history of October surprises. I'm not going to read the whole history of them. Okay, it says another recent version of the surprise is to spread lies about a candidate's personal history or regarding his or her acceptance of support from enemies like Russia or China, such as the Clinton campaign attempted to do in 2016. And as a variation on that, since the United States became enamored of wars and rumors of wars, it involves acceptance of getting engaged in a couple of little wars to demonstrate national resolve and willingness to directly confront the enemies of America, to compare one candidate with the other. This also involves considerable creativity, and the exercising of one's imagination, as America's national security has not actually been threatened or challenged by anyone since the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1963, though the current contretemps with Russia over Ukraine does indeed threaten going nuclear. He goes on, I have been thinking of the possibility of an October surprise in the current context in which the U.S. is heavily engaged in two undeclared wars, which have become controversial among voters, to put it mildly. Unfortunately, the candidates don't speak much about why we are engaged at all in conflicts that could have been resolved in various ways very early on, and there is a certain similarity in how Democrats and Republicans respond to the fighting. Both tend to support both Ukraine and Israel with only minor objections to some details on what is taking place. Both parties regard cooperating with Volodymyr Zelensky and Benjamin Netanyahu as unshakable, rock-solid foreign relationships, or at least that is what they say in public. I realize that in reality, the Ukraine war is something the U.S. and NATO are looking for a way out of, but Israel is another story and might well be working up a track. Oh, thank you. Might well be working up a trap for both parties that might be considered equivalent to an October surprise. I'm reminded by Bonnie that it's time for me to take a pill, or actually two pills. And so, if you'll excuse me for just a moment, I will take those pills and then go on. Okay. So Phil Giraldi says, I believe that in reality, the Ukraine war is something that U.S. and NATO are looking for a way out of. But Israel is another story and might well be working up a trap for both U.S. parties that might be considered equivalent to an October surprise. Apparently, I am not the only one thinking that way, including Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, who said to CNN's Aaron Burnett that, quote, I certainly worry that Prime Minister Netanyahu is watching the American election as he makes decisions about his military campaigns in the north and in Gaza, unquote. Let us accept that Israel has the most powerful foreign policy lobby in the United States. Okay, and its associated the billionaires also represent the majority of political donations going to both parties. It and its lobby also interfere in American politics and policies more than any other country, and its lobby is such that many have come around to the view that on key issues, Israel is in control of the politicians in Washington. As evidence of that, witness the outrageous bowing and cheering that war criminal Netanyahu received in Washington from the U.S. Congress, even though a majority of Americans want to stop arming Israel and protecting it in places like the UN. Compare a groveling Congress with the disdain and walkout Netanyahu received from the membership of the UN when he spoke more recently, where he denounced the UN as a, quote, a swamp of anti-Semitic bile, unquote, if you want to learn what the rest of the world thinks about the Jewish state, and its leader. And Netanyahu himself has made no secret of his desire to have Donald Trump win the presidency next month, as he correctly perceives that Trump would give him anything he wants whenever he wants it, just as he did in 2016 to 2020, when he endorsed Israel as a Jewish state, plausibly including the West Bank and Gaza, that could deal with its Palestinian minority as it sees fit. Biden/Harris have also supported Israel enthusiastically with only minor reservations, but the Democratic Party has a small but highly visible and growing anti-war element that is in part behind demonstrations taking place all over the U.S. against the genocide in Gaza. Trump, on the contrary, also has several times voiced his willingness to attack and destroy Iran, including his reaction to Iran's recent retaliatory strike as, quote, the president should blow that country to smithereens, unquote, which the Democrats, by the way, doing that might just cost us the city of Boston or maybe the city of Chicago. These idiots, including Trump, have to be very clear. We have no defense against the hypersonic intercontinental ballistic missiles of the Russians. We have no defense against the warheads, the atomic warheads, that are likely to be mounted on them. I think people have to be very clear about this and have to be very aware about this. And idiots like Trump should just STFU, which the Democrats, fearing a major regional escalation, have up until now backed away from, though they have pledged that they would stop Tehran from acquiring a nuclear weapon if it should seek to do so. That is nonsense. But Tehran already has the necessary fissile material to make a nuclear weapon. It is estimated that with the Russian help that they can get, it would only be a short time in their doing so. They could certainly have a warhead done within 2 weeks' time. It's estimated. However, of course, it's more complicated to actually assemble a missile with that particular warhead on top of that. But this could probably be done in a relatively short time with Russian help and Pakistani help also. By the way, the Pakistanis have offered nuclear weapons to the Iranians, okay, if they want them. Going on, they haven't explained how they would do that, and Netanyahu is now threatening to attack, but he refers to his Iranian nuclear sites, while his government and Biden are also discussing hitting Iran's oil facilities. There would be plenty of support for Republicans to do just that, with the ultra-hawkish Senator Lindsey Graham saying that, quote, these oil refineries need to be hit and hit hard because that is the source of cash for the regime to perpetrate their terror. Scott Ritter had an answer to that sometime today. Let's see if I can easily access that particular answer to give it to you. Scott had a few choice words for Harris today, but he also had a statement worth quoting, if I can find it again. Maybe I can find it quickly on Scott's page. Let's see. I'm sorry. I should have bookmarked it. I don't seem able to locate it at this point. Looks like Scott's page is too busy for me to find it. It was a lengthy post this morning, which is worth quoting right on this particular subject. But I won't be able to find it, so I'm not going to look any further. So let me go back. The point he was making, though, is if the oil refineries are hit and hit hard, the way the Iranians are going to retaliate, apart from simply destroying Israel, with their ballistic missiles, the other thing they're going to do is close the straits, of Hormuz and stop the flow of oil. That's going to collapse the world economy, including the American economy. It's going to drive the price of oil sky high. People won't be able to afford gas and oil. They will find the price too high to pay. This will cause bankruptcies in the United States, shutting off of services. It will be an economic disaster for the whole world. That's what happens if we hit their facilities. The Iranians and the Houthis on their side control the Straits of Hormuz and also the Bab el Mandeb Straits going into the Red Sea. Okay, on the other side, no oil will move. None will move to Europe. No oil will move to China. China will be just totally furious at this. The kind of trouble that can cause is something we really don't want to contend with. Going on with the article. Israel is at the same time increasing its pressure on Lebanon as well as on Syria, where it is bombing targets it claims to be either, quote, Iranian, unquote, or, quote, terrorist Hezbollah. Okay? In nature, I hope you um, um, caught uh, that part, okay, of the video I did with Pepe and Larry Johnson, where it was made clear Hezbollah doesn't attack civilian targets. Therefore, it cannot be terrorist Hezbollah. It doesn't do terrorism. The Israelis do terrorism and are doing it every single day. Note that Israel, going on with the article, even when it is clearly the aggressor, is always able to define itself as a victim, something which the bought and paid for U.S. government and Western media also usually fall in line to do. Netanyahu will increase his attacks on Lebanon and on Gaza and will respond to Iran's recent missile attack on Israeli territory with an escalation. The idea will be to draw the United States into the conflict to do the real fighting to destroy Iran. Who would be better in that role than a president or President-elect Donald Trump, who over the past 2 weeks has been reacting to an evidence-free claim that the Iranian government has been plotting to assassinate him? Yeah, another one of his evidence-free claims. He's always making evidence-free claims. Trump has also declared to a group of Jewish Republicans that his Republican Party to be the only U.S. political party that is genuinely pro-Israel. How convenient. So it will work out this way and be explained by Netanyahu as follow: poor, perpetual victim Israel, plagued by an anti-Semitic United Nations, enemies everywhere, is currently under attack by overwhelmingly hostile forces and is fighting valiantly, only protected in its hour of need to its great friend and ally, the United States of America. But wait, in its hour of extreme peril, when it is being assailed by the Jew-hating, probably nuclear-armed Iranian mullahs, America is having an election in which one of the two parties, the Democrats, itself has a faction that is awash with anti-Semitism and is seeking to destroy the state of Israel. Yahweh be thanked that the other party, the Republicans, is foursquare solid in defense of both Israel and the Jewish people. The Americans will hopefully know how to vote. And the Republican Party, sorry, I hit a link I should not have hit. And the Republican Party will be helped in that effort to promote the legend of the anti-Semitic Democrats by both the Israel lobby and the fire-breathing dispensationalists within its ranks, who currently appear to make up the bulk of the GOP, led by the creepy Christian Zionist headcase Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House. So let's see how this plays out. I predict that the desirability of America being Israel's bonded slave, due to God's command concerning his chosen, will at a certain level surface in the remaining campaign driven by Israel deliberately provoking situations that will force the United States government to fully commit itself to the Jewish state's, quote, defense, unquote. That will be spun to become a last-minute endorsement of Donald Trump and what he stands for in terms of its willingness to go about physically destroying all of Israel's adversaries in the Middle East. I suspect it might prove to be enough confusion to tip the result in a close election. We'll know in about a month. I too think this is a substantial danger. I think what is waiting in the wings are extremely rich billionaires, including Elon Musk, waiting to contribute hundreds of millions of dollars to be spent by super PACs in the closing days of the campaign to smear Kamala and to clear the way uh, for a presidency by Donald Trump. Right now, it's looking like it's still close to avoid that kind of October surprise. Well, Kamala is running a good campaign in certain respects. She is losing key voters because she will not recognize the genocide that's going on, and she will not come out in favor of doing anything about it. And furthermore, her programs, her economic programs, while better than Trump's, do not sufficiently appeal to people in the segments of the United States that are in dire need, especially the rural portions of the United States that are so important to the Republicans in red states. She doesn't have a program that would be attractive enough to wake up a good portion of those people and get them over to the Democratic side. That's why the election is likely to be so close. And if it is close, then October surprise of the kind we just mentioned could well turn the election to Donald Trump. So I think we all have to be ready for that. We all also should be ready for the Israeli retaliation, which I have to feel is going to come in the next couple of days. If it has not come tonight so far, it will be coming very soon. I really expected maybe tonight. Well, it's no longer tonight in Israel, of course. It must be getting close to morning there. I don't know whether they're going to do a daylight raid or wait for Sunday night, or for Monday night. John B. says, but Graham is an irresponsible psychopath. He was instrumental in creating the Ukraine fiasco. He now intends to further destroy the U.S. nation by starting an unwinnable war. He is a treasonous war criminal. Couldn't agree more. Lana says, sometimes I feel sorry for Mike Johnson. The MAGA love to attack him, but I can't feel sorry for him for reasons stated by Phil Giraldi in that particular blog. Okay, so I think we're done for tonight. I hope you liked this stream. The fact that there are 265 people on my indicator shows that you did. I will be back certainly by Tuesday. If something terrible happens before Tuesday, I might be back before then. When Tuesday comes, I will probably have another show on international politics, because so much is going on in the international politics field. There's a lot going on in terms of election news and stuff like that, but frankly, it's not as important as what's going on, okay, in the international relations field. It looks like the race has settled down to incremental gains by Harris, okay, and Waltz. Uh, they threaten now to sweep the swing states. However, that could be disturbed easily by an October surprise. Those are very small margins. Choosy heretics, choose Carnation Revolution now. The Peaceful Revolution Olympics is logical destiny. No one has to get hurt, and no laws need to be broken. I have a thumbs up for anyone who has not hidden me. Well, thank you, choosy heretic. Choose Carnation Revolution now. Steve Wolfbrand says, good night, everybody. Thank you for coming, Steve. Choosy Heretics, choose Carnation Revolution now says, much love, no fear, and remain worthy of rescue. Well, thank you, Choosy Heretics. So, and good night, everyone. I am closing this with 267 people here. Thank you all for